everybody, this is Jessica Carrier with the Joe Davis Conservation Foundation. Thanks again for joining us for another Facebook Live event. Today I'm here at the Schurmeyer Teaching Forest in the shelter here, and today we are going to talk about wild foods and foraging. Before we start our session, let's draw our raffle item from last week's Facebook Live event on bluebirds. Last week's Facebook Live event by Gabby's Gifts in Galena, and they had donated a citronella candle. And let's see, last week's winner is Tim Abel. So Tim, if you're watching, we will get a hold of you on Facebook to try to figure out how to get this to you or how you can pick it up. So, okay, thank you Gabby's for donating that gift. Today's Facebook Live event is sponsored by Gabby's Gifts again. And the item today is a flower and leaf press and a magnetic message board. So all you have to do to get entered into this raffle is comment or share this Facebook Live event on your Facebook page, and then your name will be put into the raffle. So thank you Gabby's for sponsoring another Facebook Live event. Thank you. Okay, so wild foods. Now, today's topic is wild foods, and we want to start our session off with talking about the need to be extremely cautious when foraging for wild foods. Then I'm going to show you a few common wild foods found in Joe Davis County, and then we are actually going to prepare one recipe that is both good to eat and good for the ecosystems, in that when you harvest this plant, it helps the native ecosystem thrive. So, okay, now let's talk about the caution part of this. So before you begin foraging for any wild foods, it is best to try to familiarize yourself with as many of the plants in your area as possible. It is extremely important for you to have a 100% confident ID before you start harvesting. So lookalikes are very common. Some foods are deemed edible and some foods are deemed poisonous, so it's extremely common for you to have 100% ID confidence before you harvest anything. So some common things that are lookalikes are wild parsnip and poison hemlock. Wild parsnip is considered edible and poison hemlock is extremely poisonous. Another one, everybody's familiar with morels. Well, there's a lot of false morels. They're different enough that you may not confuse them, but some false morels are edible and some of them are poisonous. So, and a lot of mushrooms, if they may be considered edible, but only after you cook them at certain temperatures. So there's a lot of research and a lot of learning that a person needs to do before you really dive into wild foraging for foods. So make sure you know how to ID those plants. The next thing is make sure your plants are not growing in an area where there may be chemicals are sprayed. This includes along roadsides or in residential lawns, golf courses, any landscaping, or even within 50 feet of an agriculture field, like a cornfield or a soybean field that may have been sprayed by pesticides or herbicides. Just make sure that whatever you're harvesting is not in an area that maybe is sprayed by chemicals that will make you sick. So, and be careful when you're harvesting to only pick as much as you need and never take all of the plant or plant community. A good rule of thumb to follow is only harvest 5% or less of that plant patch. So it's a lot smaller than you might think, 5%. That's only 1 in 20. So that's just a good general rule of thumb to follow. This allows for the patch to be able to recover and bounce back after you harvest it. So this is especially important in case of harvesting roots, because oftentimes when you're harvesting the root of a plant, you're gonna uproot and kill the whole plant. So before you start digging, take a look around and see how plentiful is this patch, and make sure that you're harvesting less than 5%, and in order for it to be able to recover after you're done harvesting. So another thing, and make sure that you know how to ID natives versus non-natives. You may have some native, non-native invasive species in your area, like garlic mustard. And if you do find some garlic mustard in your area and you know how to confidently ID it, then you can harvest as much as you like. And you can harvest like crazy, harvest the whole patch. And when you harvest your garlic mustard, you really want to pull up the garlic mustard by the root. Here, I'll show you real quick. You want to pull up your garlic mustard by the root, like that. And then you can harvest your leaves and stems off of the plant, leaving your flower stem. And really the best time to harvest your garlic mustard is before it even goes to flower. So, but at this time of year, you can still use the leaves and stems. It's gonna have a little bit different taste. But then when you take out your harvestable leaves and stems, you put them in your food bucket, and the rest of it, put this in a garbage bag or a plastic bag. If you throw it on the forest floor, it will likely re-root and re-sprout. So this garlic mustard is very hard to get rid of for exactly that reason. So, okay, so that's your invasive species. Now, and lastly, you're never allowed to harvest on any nature preserves. This includes all JDCF preserves like the Schermeyer Teaching Forest or Horseshoe Mound, Casper Bluff, Wapello. These spots here are designated to protect the life, the plant life on these sites, and so you're never allowed to harvest anything from those sites.
Okay, Maureen is asked to please show the garlic mustard plant again.
Okay, so here's the garlic mustard plant again. Here's the flower. And pretty soon here, I'll go over some of these common wild foods found in Joe Davis County. So there's your garlic mustard, very common sighting right now. If you're out walking around in the woods, very common. Okay, so, all right, now let's take a look at some of the wild foods found here in Joe Davis County. In front of me, I have a nice spread of some collected wild foods. One common one that almost everybody knows of is the dandelion. So these dandelions, you can eat the root, you can eat the leaves, you can eat the and in early spring, the leaves are still tender enough, and then later on in the season when they start producing a little flower, they get a little bit more bitter. You can still eat them, but the taste changes a lot when the plant starts to flower. So there's your common dandelion. Another very common plant is a violet. So here's the roots of a violet, the leaves, the flowers. So these flowers are really great to put as like a garnish. These are all edible flowers. Very cool. And violets are probably in a lot of your front yards right now. This is really great to have in your yard. Great for many reasons, more than just eating. It helps pollinator species too. And then we have our violet leaves. Great little bunch of violet leaves that Debbie and Abigail and John have harvested for us. And let's see, here we have some dandelion cookie dough that Debbie and her kids have prepared. And I want to show you this recipe here that Debbie uses. If you are interested in trying out some dandelion cookie dough, you can always pause the video and take a screenshot or just write down that recipe, and then you can try it yourself. Okay, now these here are ramps or wild leeks, commonly called ramps. These ramps are found in woodland areas. They grow about 6 inches high or so. And they have a little onion bulb at the bottom of them. And in the area where I have harvested this, you are only allowed to take the top portion. You're supposed to leave the bottom portion in order for them to re-sprout, and the patch can then get bigger and spread. So I only took the top portion. Now these ramps or wild leeks can be used just like a green onion or a leek. You can put them in soup, or I like to chop them up and put them in eggs. You can use these for a lot of things. You could also just chop them up and dehydrate them and use them as a dried herb. So there's your wild leeks. And we have our garlic mustard that we've already talked about. So there's our garlic mustard. Okay. Oh, and I forgot this one here. This is a mushroom. This is pheasant back mushroom. It's called pheasant back because the lines here on the mushroom look like the back of a pheasant, if you've ever seen the feathers on the back of a pheasant. So that's our pheasant back. And you really only want to eat these when they're small. Once a lot of mushrooms, when they get big, they get a little woody and the texture changes a lot. So they're more tender and the texture is better when they're smaller. Okay, now again, make sure you have 100% confident ID before you go out harvesting anything, because there's a common lookalikes. So it's great if you want to start foraging to find a mentor that knows what they're doing and has done this before. So after you forage and you get that down, there's also a learning curve with their preparing process. So you have to prepare these foods in a way that makes them edible and good to eat, tasty. So, okay, what we're gonna make today, our recipe is a garlic mustard pesto. So I wanna show everybody this garlic mustard pesto recipe here. There's a lot of different versions of this. It's very simple, just a few ingredients that you might have in your house already. And all you need is a blender. You don't really need to cook this. There are other recipes that are maybe a little bit more complicated. You can look more up online, but I chose this simple one because it's quick and easy, and it's a great thing to get a person started with some wild foraging. Okay, so here we have our garlic mustard leaves. I have picked them off of their stems and I have washed and blot dried them. So here's the garlic mustard leaf. And so there's our garlic mustard leaves. Here's our cheese. I'm actually substituting Parmesan because it's a little bit less expensive. So I'm going to use some Parmesan cheese, red pepper flakes, salt, olive oil, lemon juice, and sunflower seeds. So, okay, let me bring up my recipe here. Okay, now the first thing we want to do, here's our blender, we want to put in our 2 cups of garlic mustard leaves. So I'm going to put some in there, and what I like to do is I'll put some at the bottom, but then I'll leave some to put at the top too. Okay, 2 cups of garlic mustard leaves, so that's about 1 cup, maybe 1.5 cups. Okay, and then we need our 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese. And depending on what kind of cheese you use, change the flavor of your garlic mustard. So maybe you're not a big fan of Parmesan, you can use whatever you like. This specific recipe actually calls for pecorino cheese. So, okay. And then we need our 1 tablespoon of raw sunflower seeds. Now, if you're like me, you don't always measure everything. So we'll call that about 1 tablespoon there. And 1 teaspoon lemon juice. Okay, I've got my lemon press. Put my lemon in there. 1 teaspoon. That may be about 1 teaspoon right there. Okay. And then our salt, a little 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I'll just do a really little bit here. And now you can always tweak your recipe to, maybe you like your pesto a little bit more salty or a little bit more lemony. So you can really tweak it however you like with any recipe. Okay, and then your red pepper flakes. Now, if you really like spicy stuff, then you can put lots of red pepper flakes. But I'm not a huge fan of spicy stuff, so I just kind of put a little bit of red pepper flakes in there. Just a little bit. A few little seeds. Surprise you every once in a while. Okay. And then I'll put a little bit more leaves in there because I think that helps when it's blending. Okay. All right, and then I'll put my lid on. There we go, and I'll put it in my blender. Now, to pulse this, then this blender's not great at pulsing, but if you let it pulse a little bit, then it will chop up everything that the little blades can reach, and then it will slump back down, and then it will start spinning again, and then it will slump back down, so it helps to get a nice even puree. And sometimes I gotta take it out, shake it around, put it back in there. Shake it around even more. Maybe you guys have better blenders than me.
Maureen is asking, do you put olive oil in?
Oh yes, I do put olive oil. I like to chop it all up first and then add the olive oil. Just because sometimes when I add the olive oil early, things don't really slump down in the blender as much. So it's harder to get it to shake around. But I will add it in just a little bit here. Okay, let's take a look. All right. Ooh, very nice. Okay, so there we have. Now I just need to add my olive oil. Looks good. Let's see, it calls for 2 tablespoons. So I'll just, now, I know this isn't a great measurement, but that's okay. Recipes are meant to be tweaked. Okay. And I encourage everybody to research all different kinds of recipes for garlic mustard pesto. Garlic mustard is a great thing to start using in the kitchen because garlic mustard was originally brought here as a culinary herb from Europe. So now we have it everywhere. So it's a good thing, you know, that we use it for the purposes that we brought it here for. Okay, here we go. Garlic mustard pesto. There we go. And now I can take some of this out. Got my little spatula.
Okay, Barb is asking, what are we making? She tuned in late. We are making garlic mustard pesto.
Yeah, garlic mustard pesto. So there we go. Garlic mustard pesto. So very, very good. You can put this on pasta, on bread. You can put this, sometimes I put it on my eggs also. I put a lot of things on eggs. So really simple, easy thing to make at home and use up that garlic mustard that's growing in nearby. So if anybody has questions, now is a great time to ask any questions you have. And remember, in Illinois, you want to really look up your laws and regulations for wild foraging. I'm not an expert in Illinois foraging in the laws here, so it's a really good idea to research as much as possible, just to make sure you're not doing anything illegal. I really recommend you just stay on your own private property for now and just do a lot of research and make sure you have 100% confident ID before you start harvesting something. If you're out looking around at things in your backyard and you're wondering if things are edible, snap a picture of it, look it up online, but always, always, always ask an expert. So, because there's common lookalikes, and so you can try to learn as much as possible about what's in your area, but it's always a good idea to find an expert or find a mentor to come with you, or to kind of walk you through some of the beginning stages of wild foraging.
Okay, Barb is asking if we could show the intact garlic mustard plant one more time.
Yes. Okay, so here we go. Here's our garlic mustard. So remember, you want to rip up your garlic mustard by the root, and then pick off your leaves and tender stems, put them in your food bucket, and then the rest of the plant can go in a plastic bag, because this garlic mustard, if you just throw it on the forest floor, it will re-root or re-sprout. So this is why they're very hard to get rid of. So you really have to put it in a plastic bag, or burn it, make a big pile and burn it if you can. So garlic mustard's a pain to get rid of. It's a non-native invasive species that's really taking over a lot of ecosystems right now. So if you're out and about, pull some garlic mustard.
Okay, we've had some requests, and yes, we will post both these recipes online with a list of ingredients later on today.
Great.
And Jan is asking, will we be conducting any foraging walks?
Maybe. We're kind of taking our events just a couple months at a time right now. So maybe we might be conducting some foraging walks just to kind of ID some things. Keep emailing us and see what we have in the works. You can always email us, by the way, at info@jdcf.org for any information. We are a nonprofit, so if you're interested in becoming a member or just making a donation, that's another way that you can get a hold of us, is through our website, jdcf.org. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining me for today's Facebook Live event on wild foods. If you have additional questions, you can write them in the comments section. And thank you, Gabby's Gifts, for sponsoring. We will see everybody next week. So thank you, everybody.